choice or belief. We've got a voice, now you'll see. Let's raise a glass, you and me. We are the face you can't see. You've got a choice or belief. We've got a voice, now you'll see. Let's raise a glass, you and me.
Welcome to Earthtide Studios. I'm Zach Knight, and in today's video, we are looking at how to build a choir from scratch in a home studio. We're going to break down the track Equilibrium by Color and Shade, where I used 4 people to build a choir. We also have a free vocal production course that teaches you the basics of recording, editing, and mixing. If you'd like that, just click the link below and it's yours. And now let's look at building a choir. So we're in the session, guys, looking at the choir that I built for the track Equilibrium by Color and Shade. Now, this was a lot of fun to build, but it was a ton of work. As you could hear there in the preview at the start of the video, there's a lot of stuff going on, and I'm actually going to break it down for you right now. So we've got the full actual music mix of the track going on here. We've got drums, which kick in over here. We've got all these different guitars going on as well. These are just the clean guitars that are happening during the choir section, and there's also a bass that kicks in here when the drums kick in as well, and there's a solo that happens, which is over here. However, the vocals themselves are really what is making this section sound super cool and super special. What we've got going on here is most of the vocals are actually happening under this bus. I've called it the chant bus here, and we're looking at all of these vocals from here all the way to here that are running into that chant bus, and they are the main sung vocals for this choir section here. I'll show you what they sound like on their own.
We are the face you can't see. You've got a choice or belief. We've got a voice, now you'll see. Let's raise a glass, you and me.
So there's a lot of different things going on in here, but the main thing to note is that all of the vocals are doing exactly the same thing. When you're they're singing the same thing, there's no harmonies going on here except for the octave difference between them. There's no, extra things happening in terms of adjustment of pitch and all of that. It's all the same thing, because for this particular part, for this song, we really wanted it to be anthemic, but we wanted it to sound very unison. You definitely can build up a choir with lots of different harmony layers, but in this particular case, we wanted a unison feel. The other thing to note is that we also have a gang vocal bus here. Now, I've called it group vocals in this particular case, but effectively it is actually gang vocals. This is all just shouted and yelled vocals. We really wanted this particular choir to have quite a large sort of larger than life anthemic kind of sound. And the easiest way to do that is to just add a lot of aggression in the actual vocal itself. So I'll show you what the gang vocals or group vocals sound like.
We are the face you can't see. You've got a choice or belief. We've got a voice, now you'll see. Let's raise a glass, you and me.
So you can see there's a lot of, energy and aggression being added in with those vocals. And the last vocals that we've got going there in the choir section are actually full screen vocals. Now, these are my vocals that I put in here. They sit in the background, but I'll show you what they sound like on their own. They're a lot more full on than the rest of the song.
We are the face you can't see. You've got a choice or belief. We've got a voice, now you'll see. Let's raise a glass, you and me.
Now, I actually pitch screamed those vocals. They are quite low compared to what I've done in the rest of the song there. But I just felt like they could, provide a little bit more of a foundational tone and add a little bit more of aggression and a little bit of a different kind of sound in there. So now that we've seen a breakdown of the session, let's delve into the actual production that's gone on to create this choir. When I was building this, we had the main idea, the main lyric, the main vocal that we were doing, and we wanted to build upon it. So we figured the best way to do it was to actually just stack all the voices that we had available in the studio at the time and see what we could do about trying to make it kind of special. We started off with the main vocal sung down the octave by the singer Tim, and in this particular case, I've actually done 4 left and rights. So in this particular case, we've got 2 stereo tracks. Every one of these is an individual take. Every one of these has been edited and tuned as well. You could go through and do a rough tune on all of these just using auto tune if you wanted to, with a real-time speed, like a tuning speed of maybe sort of 20 or something along those lines if you wanted to achieve this. Or alternatively, you could leave it untuned if the performance was really good. But in this particular case, we wanted it to be really, really in tune, just because it was so stark on its own, with like very little musicality running behind it. So I'll show you what it sounds like with Tim singing down the octave with 2 stereo tracks here.
We are the face you can't see. You've got a choice, so believe. We've got a voice, now you'll see. Let's raise a glass, you and me.
So as you can see, it's super clean, it's super clear, and in this particular case, I really made sure that the performance was quite bright sounding, because this section was meant to make everything sound a little bit uplifting. It's a bit of a hopeful message. So, that was definitely what we got out of the performance there. Contrast to that, we then get Tim to sing it up the octave. And this is where you get a lot more of the power out of the sung vocal. And I definitely made sure that we got a really solid performance on this. This is again another 2 left and right, so another 2 stereo tracks of the same line.
We are the face you can't see. You've got a choice, so believe. We've got a voice, now you'll see. Let's raise a glass, you and me.
So that definitely sounds a lot more present, a lot more powerful, and that's really bringing home the message of this vocal and giving it a lot more sincerity in the part. That's definitely not enough to be able to build it into a choir section. So the next thing that I did was I lent my own voice to it. Now, I don't have the same kind of range, so I couldn't sing this up the octave, so I sang it down the octave, and there's a little bit more tuning going on this because I'm not a particularly great singer, but it was just really there to provide a bit more foundation to the part.
We are the face you can't see. You've got a choice, so believe. We've got a voice, now you'll see. Let's raise a glass, you and me.
So I'll show you what that sounds like now with both of Tim's high and low vocals combined.
We are the face you can't see. You've got a choice, so believe. We've got a voice, now you'll see. Let's raise a glass, you and me.
So it's starting to fill out a bit more, but it's still not enough for it to be a really big and anthemic choir. You could definitely get away with this many tracks if you were doing some more harmonies and playing around with some different mixing things, but we really wanted this to sound like a full choir of people. So the next best thing to do after that is to change it up and add a different kind of voice altogether. So what we did is we got very lucky. Tim's sister is an incredible singer, and we actually got her to come into the studio and sing both down the octave and up the octave as well to add a completely different tone to the way that the vocal sounded. So this is her singing down the octave.
We are the face you can't see. You got a choice, so believe. We've got a voice, now you'll see. Let's raise a glass, you and me.
And then this is her singing up the octave.
We are the face you can't see. You got a choice, so believe. We've got a voice, now you'll see. Let's raise a glass, you and me.
So as you can see, that's going to add a totally different characteristic to the choir. So now I'll put all of that together, and as you can hear, it sounds significantly better once we add that female voice there.
We are the face you can't see. You've got a choice, so believe. voice, now you'll see. Let's raise a glass, you and me.
So effectively, that is already a choir, and we could just leave it there, and that would be totally fine. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show you what it sounds like in the song when we remove all of the group vocals, and we also remove all of my scream vocals, and we play the song without those.
We are the face you can't see. You've got a choice, so believe. We've got a voice, now you'll see. Let's raise a glass, you and me.
As you can tell, it's already sounding pretty damn good. But it's just not enough. It's still missing something, and it's actually not that much. But to achieve that extra level beyond where we are right now with this choir that's been built out of 3 voices, there's 2 different ways you can go about it. You could just do a small little bit more of doing the same thing and put a little bit more aggression into it. But there's no fun in that when you could go really over the top and do pretty much the same amount of vocals again, but just do it all aggressive. So to add that extra bit of power and aggression to the choir, as discussed, we did do gang vocals. I'm actually going to show you how much effort we put into getting those, which is almost the same as the choir. In this particular case, we have 32 tracks of gang vocals. This was all just done with Tim and myself. I'll show you what mine sounded like. So this is 16 tracks of me just yelling.
We are the face you can't see. You've got a choice, so believe. We've got a voice, now you'll see. Let's raise a glass, you and me.
As you can see, it sounds pretty chanty. It doesn't necessarily sound very choir-like, but it's definitely adding quite a thick and aggressive tone to the choir itself, and it's definitely going to help add some more unique characteristics to it and make it sound larger than life. Contrast that to Tim's voice here. He's, yelled this and kind of sung it at the same time because that's just how it works for him. His voice has a little bit more harshness going up in there in that yell sort of range. I'll show you what it sounds like. This is 16 tracks of him.
We are the face you can't see. You've got a choice, so believe. We've got a voice, now you'll see. Let's raise a glass, you and me.
So you can see it's got a different kind of tone going on there. It's adding a bit more of a harshness, and it's definitely adding a lot more energy to the choir. So all of those group vocals together sound like this.
We are the face you can't see. You've got a choice, so believe. We've got a voice, now you'll see. Let's raise a glass, you and me.
And adding them with the sung vocals sounds like this.
We are the face you can't see. You've got a choice, so believe. We've got a voice, now you'll see. Let's raise a glass, you and me.
Now, let's take the group vocals away again and have a listen to what gets lost.
We are the face you can't see. You've got a choice, so believe. We've got a voice, now you'll see. Let's raise a glass, you and me.
It's quite noticeable how much energy gets lost by losing basically 32 tracks of people yelling in the background. It's turned down quite low as well versus the sung vocals, but it definitely adds a lot. The final little bit to note is that we do, of course, have these scream vocals here. We heard them before. I'm just going to show you what it sounds like with all of those playing at the same time, with the gang vocals and with the sung vocals as well. They don't add very much, but they definitely add a little bit of characteristic.
We are the face you can't see. You've got a choice, so believe. We've got a voice, now you'll see. Let's raise a glass, you and me.
And without.
We are the face you can't see. You've got a choice, so believe. We've got a voice, now you'll see. Let's raise a glass, you and me.
It's quite minor. It's just adding a little bit more heat to that choir. So now that we've heard what the choir sounds like, let's have a quick look at the mixing that we've got going on these. I've actually run through the way that I mix these kind of vocals in some previous videos, but I'm just going to show you now. So for the sung vocals, I've got all of them running into this one bus, and we'll actually just have a look at what's going on volume wise for them as well. They're pretty much all left and right, fully panned. If you wanted to, you could collapse some of them as well, reduce the panning, maybe 90 left, 90 right, 80 left, 80 right for different vocals. I'd probably bring the lower vocals closer to the center and the higher vocals more further spread out if you wanted to collapse things. I decided after a bit of experimentation that we didn't need that for the mix, but you definitely could. I've got them all running here between -24 to about -27 dB running into this bus. So obviously they're not running very hot, and the bus itself has just first up got a little bit of EQ going on here, scooping out some low end at about 150, removing a whole bunch of annoying muffly tone here at about 350. Also removing an annoying resonant frequency at about 1K, and something else also here at 2700. I'll remove all of the other processing and we'll show you what it sounds like without the EQ and then with.
We are the face you can't see. You've got a choice of belief. We've got a voice, now you'll see. Let's raise a glass, you and me. We are the face you can't see. You've got a choice of belief.
So as you can see, it just cleans up that low end and helps the vocal, it kind of lifts, so to speak, lifts the pillow of the vocal and makes it sound a little bit clearer. The next thing that I'm doing after that is we're hitting it with one of my favorite vocal compressors to use, which is the 1176 Blueface. In this particular case, I'm using the In Your Face vocal preset. And from what I remember, we're hitting this pretty hard. Let's have a listen.
We are the face you can't see. You've got a choice of belief. We've got a voice, now you'll see. Let's raise a glass, you and me.
And without.
We are the face you can't see. You've got a choice of belief. We've got a voice, now you'll see. Let's raise a glass, you and me.
Now, there is a little bit of a volume bump that's happening there. It's kind of not that surprising though, because there's so many different voices hitting this compressor. It's definitely going to even out the discrepancies in the volumes between all of the voices, because I was not going to put a compressor on every single one of those tracks. That would have been a big waste of CPU. So there is a little bit of a volume boost happening there, and that's not just from the compression, but definitely it's controlling the level of all of the vocals, which is really, and giving them a bit more push in the mix as well, which is, obviously quite nice. After the compressor, the next thing that we're running is CLA vocals. Now, in this particular case, this is actually doing a really large amount of the processing. I'm removing a little bit of low end, adding a little bit of treble, a bit more compression, a little bit of reverb, a bit of delay, and I'm bypassing the pitch section altogether. Let's have a listen to what this is doing.
We are the face you can't see. You've got a choice of belief. We've got a voice, now you'll see. Let's raise a glass, you and me.
And without.
We are the face you can't see. You've got a choice of belief. We've got a voice, now you'll see. Let's raise a glass, you and me.
So it's making a massive difference. It's really cleaning up even more of that low end, especially what's been brought up by the compressor, giving it a bit more brightness as well, controlling it a little bit more, and obviously giving it more space with that reverb and that delay that's added in there, but it's kind of subtle. Afterwards, I'm also running the Kramer tape in the stereo mode here. This is just the preset that I've explained that I built from a session that I saw of Colin Brittain. I find that it just adds a little bit of spread, and I liked what it was doing on this section here. Have a listen.
We are the face you can't see. You've got a choice of belief. We've got
So it's quite subtle. It's just adding a little bit there and just, you know, bringing the vocal with a bit more spread, but otherwise not too much. And after Kramer tape, I'm just running the L1 limiter. We're just running this here to control the vocal because at the end of the day, we've got a lot of stuff happening here and I really just want to make sure that the volume is pretty consistent across the vocal.
We are the face you can't see. You've got a choice, so believe. We've got a voice, now you'll see. Let's raise a glass, you and me.
But it's not it's not doing a drastic amount of limiting there. It's just really controlling just the edges of the vocal and making sure it's consistent. After that, I'm running two different reverbs that I've just got on the whole mix session here. We've got a long form one going. So this is, I call it my atmospheric reverb. This one I've built with Valhalla Room. We've got it's the big vocal preset and I've adjusted it to 8 seconds and brought the filtering, the high cut to 8,000. And after that, I've got FabFilter Pro Q2 running as well. We're scooping out the low end up to 390 and the high end up to 6K as well. And let's have a listen to what that sounds like.
We are the face you can't see. You've got a choice, so believe.
So you can hear that reverb tail happening there. It's actually not being sent very hard to the reverb at all. It's sitting at about minus 20 dB, but it's just adding a lot more spread to it. After that, I'm using my long plate reverb. This is using the IRL full stereo from Waves, and I'm using a large plate preset. This is one of the Bricasti M7 ones. This particular reverb is about 3.5 seconds long, and it's 100% dry, no pre-delay. And then after that, we're running FabFilter Pro Q2, removing some low end just below 120, removing some high end above 5,000. The low end has got a higher removal at 30 dB and the high end only 18. And then there's a resonant frequency sitting at about 207 that we got rid of as well. Let's listen to what that is doing.
We've got a voice, now you'll see. Let's raise a glass, you and me. We are the face you can't see. You've got a choice, so believe. We've got a voice, now you'll see. Let's raise a glass, you and me.
So this is actually doing the bulk of the reverb and adding a lot more of a, big spacious sound to the choir. And last up is just my vocal delay that I've got running across the whole session here. This was just put on because it was the delay I had available. It's more designed for the main vocal of the whole song, but I've got a de-esser running here, which is just helping remove a little bit of sibilance that's coming through. Other than that, we've got Echo Boy running at a quarter note delay, a little bit of feedback, cutting out some low end and some high end here, running it on studio tape. There's a bit of saturation going as well. And then after that, we're really filtering out this delay at 450, removing low end up to there and removing high end past 3K. Let's have a listen to what that's doing.
We are the face you can't see. You've got a choice, so believe. We've got a voice, now you'll see. Let's raise a glass, you and me. We are the face you can't see. You've got a choice, so believe.
It's not really doing a crazy amount to the vocal, but it's definitely just giving it a little bit more spread, and using it as a delay obviously helps, to make it a bit different to what's going on with the reverb in the mix. In terms of the mixing that's going on in the gang vocals, it's not that dissimilar. The EQ, I'm removing that and, sort of muffly frequency at about 350. The low end is about the same. I haven't removed any other resonant frequencies. We're doing similar compression with the In Your Face preset from CLA 76 Blueface, and we're also using the CLA vocals, but in this particular case, I'm actually boosting the low end a really, really small amount. Otherwise, the processing that's happening from CLA vocals is pretty much the same. Kramer tape is the same, limiting the same, and I'm also running it to the same sends as well. However, the levels that are on here are a little bit different. It's got a little bit more reverb, and all of those vocals are turned down a little bit more. They're all turned sort of down between 28 to 29 dB into the group vocal, and the bus itself is turned down by 2 dB. Other than that, the mixing that's happening on the group vocal, the gang vocals, is kind of not too dissimilar from the choir. They are meant to sit together, so naturally I wouldn't want to make them sound too different from each other.
So that's my take on how to build a choir from scratch in a home studio. I did use 4 voices, but you could probably do this with 1 or 2. But how many voices would you use to build a choir like this? And have you got any songs that you've been working on recently that could use this kind of technique? If you like the song, you can also check out the Equilibrium film clip. I'll leave a link for that below. And don't forget, we've got our vocal production course down there too. But for now, take it easy.
Bye.